Dr. Dora Moutsiou is is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Cyprus, specializing in Paleolithic archaeology. Her work combines traditional archaeology methods with modern approaches like geochemistry and paleoecology. Currently, she's engaged in a number of collaborative field projects that explore island colonization and the impacts of climate change. Now, if you've been following the latest archaeological news in Cyprus, you'll know that our little island has recently made headlines, that hunter-gatherers may have settled in Cyprus thousands of years earlier than previously thought, upending the persistent narratives of isolation and inaccessibility. And Dora is part of that team. So I welcome her to the History of Cyprus podcast and thank her for taking the time to talk to us about these new updates in her field of work. So Dora, thank you for accepting my invitation.
Andreas, thank you so much for inviting me.
It's great just to have some new research to share with people, and this is something that's really I noticed it made headlines in the typical sources, and seemed to be like a big deal, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too. I have to say before we go into the research side of things that obviously I am part of a team. I'm not going to mention every single one of them, but the key people were co-authors in that paper that you mentioned. And I also should mention that our project was possible with the financial support by the Research and Innovation Foundation of the Republic of Cyprus, who are doing a lot to support innovative research. And humanities struggle with funding the last few years. It's not a secret thing, it's a universal. And I think our paper has actually contributed quite significantly to showcase that humanities can be exciting and can be innovative.
This sounds like it's really at the forefront of new research, and we'll dive right into it.
No, it is truly, I don't like to use the word revolution too much, but it is quite revolutionary what we've done. It's very significant. And for lack of time and funding to spend years in the field trying to collect data, we used mathematical models to try and estimate where we need to look for new sites and to basically try and put our perspective on the big question on where did early humans reach and colonize Cyprus, which is a long-lasting research question, not only for Cyprus, for the Mediterranean islands and other island parts of the world, of course, as well. But Cyprus is quite an enigmatic case because the narratives of isolation and lack of human presence until very recently is very persisting. So what we did was we used mathematical modeling to show that, in fact, Cyprus could have been colonized earlier than thought, and that what is the most important part and contribution of our paper is that hunter-gatherers reaching Cyprus would not have been an accidental arrival, but rather an organized effort, and that it would have included large groups of people. Contra the established narrative that sees small groups of hunter-gatherers who may have accidentally arrived to the island and subsequently died off because they couldn't survive. So this is the big change that our paper puts forward.
Let's try to understand sort of the timelines here. Now, with the site of Akrotiri Aitogremnos notwithstanding, the traditional narrative pigeonholes the earliest human settlement in Cyprus to the Holocene era. And what you're saying and what your team has discovered is that it would have likely have been colonized in the Pleistocene. So to begin with, let's just talk about how these eras are divided. So what they correspond to. So I think like the Holocene is 10,000 years ago. Can you kind of break down the timelines and tell us what defines these periods?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, the Pleistocene is a large period starting at 2.58 million years ago up to 12,000 years ago, a long stretch of time. While the Holocene starts at around 12,000 years ago to the present. What we need to make absolutely clear is that these are geological terms. They're not archaeological terms. But we prefer to use geological terms in our work because they're constant globally. So we can communicate and understand each other wherever we work in the world. So in archaeological terms, if I were to summarize it very, very, very briefly, during the Pleistocene, we have hunter-gatherers. So we have mobile groups of people occupying various parts of the world. Whereas in the Holocene, the biggest change we see is the development of agropastoralism, and then farming and settlements and people staying in one place. This is the major difference between the two eras. If we wanna say about what happens in terms of climate, for example, we have a lot of glacial and interglacial periods, so ice ages and warmer periods, and that happens throughout this 2.5 million years. And what happens at the end of the Pleistocene, so the terminal Pleistocene at the boundary with the Holocene, so 20,000 years ago to 11,000 years ago, we have an acceleration of these climatic events, so rapid changes from warmer and wetter phases to colder and drier phases. It's a phase where the alterations happen very rapidly.
So what would the climate have been like in Cyprus in this period? And I mean, for listeners, maybe it'll help us understand how it compares to Cyprus's climate today.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And frankly, we don't exactly know. So the climatic record of Cyprus in the past is very fragmented. And really, we use proxies from other regions, so the Levant and Greece, to make estimates. But we don't really have direct data from the island itself to tell exactly what happens. So if we focus, for example, in the latest part of the Pleistocene, we can extrapolate from the global data sets that after the last glacial maximum, where we had the last ice age, which we didn't have glaciers on Cyprus, as far as I know at least, we have this period of dramatic shifts from wetter and warmer to drier and colder. The last 14,000 years where our paper estimates the first humans will have arrived will have been a period of warmer and wetter conditions. So we have rise in temperatures and precipitation. Now, would it have been hotter than it is today? Frankly, with the 40 plus degrees that we're experiencing mid-July, I don't know. Probably it wouldn't have been as hot as today, but we don't really know is the honest answer.
Fair enough. Does that hold true for the access to fresh water as well? I mean, now we know Cyprus is, considered semi-arid. Cyprus has experienced periods of drought where they've had to put restrictions on water usage, especially in the summer. Do we know if that would have been the case too with access to water?
So in terms of the paleohydrologic network, so the network of freshwater sources in the Pleistocene, again, it is not exactly possible to reconstruct the exact freshwater sources availability on the island. But if we use, again, proxies, and I will concentrate here on the geology. So there is a a specific kind of limestone, travertine is called, that is a result of hot springs, thermal springs. So when we find these deposits on the landscape, we know that at some stage there used to be water there. Also, the Pleistocene fauna that we have, certain species need water to survive. So there must have been sufficient fresh water for those species to be on the island long term. And if I were to venture an answer, I would say that there were probably more water sources, but it depends also where we are. And at higher elevations, we have definitely more water sources even today. And it also depends on the period. But there are a lot of streams, there are a lot of pools that are being created after heavy rainfall. So I don't think freshwater availability would have been a problem for human survival if we're taking it that way in the Pleistocene.
So Cyprus, for those listening, is an island. I'm sure everyone knows that. But what I want to kind of better understand is, as far as early humans go, in order to take to open water, what sort of technological milestones did humans have to reach in order to actually do that and take to the sea? And just to highlight a point that you made earlier, not accidentally, like purposely, they possibly navigated to Cyprus. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but clearly there has to be a certain level of competency when it comes to technological understanding.
Absolutely. And before I get to your question, actually, Cyprus not only is an island, but it has always been an island for the last 5 million years or so. So there is no doubt that whoever and whenever reached the island for the first time and subsequently, they had to have used some sort of seaworthy vessel. Okay. So in terms of technological milestones, first of all, you need the toolkits to make your vessel. So you need your hammers, your axes, your adzes, your scrapers, that sort of thing. Of course, you need also fiber technology to put your pieces together. Control use of fire, I would say, because to make your sort of adhesive agent, like your glue, to put things together. And containers, which don't necessarily need to be made of pottery. We know we can have containers made of skin, hides, some sort of, I don't know the term, but some sort of pumpkin that they use even today in Cyprus to drink wine from.
Yeah, the gourd, yeah.
Yes, those ones, yes. Yeah. And potentially hides to make into sails or some paddles, that sort of thing. What is important to note is that all of these technologies are available in the Paleolithic. So at least, of course, stone tools, millions of years, at least 3 million of years we have stone tool technology. Woven flax to make fibers, we have from at least 30,000 years. Control use of fire, at least 400,000 years. So none of this is new. So in my view, what you really need is the desire to take to the sea. And I think all humans have this desire to explore. And of course, the navigational skills, winds, currents, to understand how the sea works, etc. That cognitively, they were skills that humans have from very early on. Because if we see from other parts of the world, we have humans, and not even actually Homo sapiens, but earlier species crossing the sea as early as 800,000 years ago, for example, at Flores. Definitely 65,000 years ago in Australia. Maybe, that's with a question mark, 1.8 to 1.4 million years ago, humans may have crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. And closer to home, we have the finds from Crete at 130,000 years ago, that, again, Crete, as Cyprus, was never connected to the mainland. So whoever reached the island, whenever they reached it, they will have used some sort of maritime travel.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, there's even evidence of Neanderthals in Greece, which would also suggest that they've had the ability to travel, to your point.
Yes, you're probably referring to Stelida in Naxos, which is it's another project that I'm involved in. Yes, there is some evidence for that as well. We don't have the, I always keep saying it would be nice to have some human remains as well. We rely on the lithic technology for that. There is also potential finds in Kefalonia and other parts, other Greek islands. The difficulty with the Aegean is, and the Ionian, I guess, is to firmly establish when the people were there and how that corresponds to sea level, in order to see if those islands were insular or connected to the mainland.
So what push and pull factors would these early peoples have experienced to take to the sea? And to add to that, do we have any idea of where they would have come from? Can we conclusively say, okay, this is from the Middle East or the Near East? Is it from Anatolia? Is it from North Africa? Can we conclusively say where they're from? And again, what sort of push and pull factors are they experiencing?
Well, the current narratives, the current framework that's more with the Holocene arrivals is that with the establishment of agropastoralism in the Near East, and we have population growth. Population growth means more people stuck together in smaller spaces, and this overpopulation creates conflict, not enough space for people to grow their products, etc. And simultaneously, you have rising sea levels that also floods the coastlines and areas where people could have explored. So the idea is that due to these pressures on the mainland, people were pushed, without really wanting to move, pushed to the islands. At least this is the narrative for the Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus. I have a difficulty accepting this, and I actually argue that instead of having people being pushed out, I think we have people going out. And there is a natural drive and a natural desire in humans to explore. And maybe the view we have of Cyprus today, of a hot and dry island, skews our perception of what the island would have been like in the past. It is a resource-rich environment, and it is a large island, so it has sufficient resources. And not only the mainland, but we also have the coastline and the marine resources. So I think people actually wanted to explore rather than being pushed to move.
Do we know where they might have come from?
Right. Well, it depends, not who you ask, but what sort of field of study. The Levant is the prime candidate, and there is DNA evidence, but yeah, don't ask me too much about that. It's not my field of study. In terms of similarities in the material culture, we do have a lot of common elements in the material expression between Cyprus and the Levant in the Ceramic Neolithic especially. So in the architecture, there are similarities, the lithic technology, there are similarities. Of course, we also have the fauna and flora species that arrive to the island, and they originate from the Levant. We did a couple of years ago with some colleagues a drifting simulation model to see, in terms of sea, what will be the easiest routes for people to come from. The drifting, so which means that people went on a sort of vessel and drifted to the island. The successful trips, most of them were from southern Turkey. We don't have the archaeological evidence, though, for departure and arrival points. And of course, people would not have drifted, they will have traveled. So a trip from the Levant is not such a far-fetched theory.
Yeah, so you actually make the point, and this is a quote from one of your papers, that, quote, it must have involved extensive and well-planned expeditions, end quote. So what is that based on? Like, how are you able to make that conclusion?
Well, as we saw in our paper, for people to arrive on Cyprus and establish a permanent population there, avoiding the risk of extinction, you need large numbers of people. So you need at least 1,000 to 1,300 people arriving within less than 100 years. These are the numbers of people you need to establish a founding population. It doesn't mean that they all arrived like 1,000 people, like an invasion in one go. It could have been, and it most likely was, smaller groups arriving at high frequencies during that time. So the numbers of people we are talking about, that can't be a result of a random trip or an accidental arrival.
Right. Would Cyprus have been easier to reach, say, and we're talking about 14,000 years ago, if I've got the date correct? Would it have been easier to reach? What were the reduced sea levels at the time? Anything that makes it more accessible?
Well, that's another good question, and I've been thinking about it myself. Really, I don't think there will have been much difference. Sea levels will have been lower at that stage. I think it was probably 85 meters lower. So, yeah, the distances will have been shorter, and really as short as 30 to 60 kilometers of open sea to cross, depending on where you are. But these are not massive distances, and also Cyprus will have been visible from parts of the mainland, for example, from the Taurus Mountains in Turkey, Mount Lebanon, from parts of Syria, during that time, as it is visible today on a clear day. So I don't think it will have been dramatically different in terms of ease of access.
These early communities that are making their way to Cyprus, what would they have looked like? I mean, would they have been building shelters? Can you describe what we think these early peoples were like on Cyprus?
Well, we need to think that hunter-gatherers, as we said at the beginning, they're communities that go back like 2 million years. We don't have such a long record in Cyprus, obviously. And for a lot of our information, we rely on modern hunter-gatherer societies as well. So the most important parameter of these groups is that they rely on mobility as a survival strategy. So they cover at least 25 kilometers return trips on a daily basis to procure food and other materials for their survival. So having a long-term settlement somewhere will have been impractical. It's not part of their practices. They will have ranged from anything from an extended family, so parents, children, grandparents, maybe 20 people, to a band of 100 people. They will have moved around a lot. You mentioned shelters. the idea we have, this picture of hunter-gatherers living in rock shelters, in caves, is quite skewed, and really they make short-term camps everywhere and predominantly in open-air sites. So they don't prefer necessarily rock shelters or caves. They're out in the open and they build whatever shelters they need to build for however long they stay, but they are mobile.
Just to make it clear, these are not farming communities. These are hunter-gatherers. They're not setting up shop in one place. They are moving. They are hunting fauna on Cyprus. Would we say that what sort of fauna are they hunting? I mean, I interviewed Alan Simmons a couple years ago, and we talked about pygmy hippos and pygmy elephants, and it is, his point is well made, but it's still somewhat controversial. There's still some pushback. This period in time, though, that would clearly correspond with I believe it corresponds with the existence of pygmy hippos, for example. So would that have been on the diet? In their diet, would there have been other particular animals that they would have been eating and hunting at this time?
For sure, the endemic species that we have on the island, as you said, we have the dwarfed hippo. We have at least a dwarfed species of elephant, maybe two. We have a genet, if I pronounce it correctly, some rodents, some bats. These are all things that the people could have eaten. There are some potentially fallow deer, but this is still debated if it's a Pleistocene species or if it was introduced later. And there are birds, and of course we must not forget the maritime resources, fish and shellfish and things like that. Now I'm very well aware of the debate about acrotheory and the association of humans with hippos. But if the resources are there, and this is the Pleistocene fauna that we know that Cyprus had, humans will have hunted it, obviously. I mean, meat is a great source of calories. I'm not saying that they were exclusive meat eaters. Obviously, they were eating other things, but I'm sure they were also hunting all the species that were available to them.
Right, and I mean, at least to me, that would absolutely make sense. So, what do you think is the resistance to what is clearly a shifting paradigm? Because you make the point that irrespective of the difficulties associated with movement and adaptations, humans were successful in settling all sorts of inhospitable environments. And I mean, we can see that because humanity has spread all across the world. And it doesn't matter what sort of environments, we've figured out a way to adapt and thrive. But, this is, I suppose there was some resistance saying Cyprus was inhospitable to that. I mean, unless you were farming, Cyprus was not a very welcoming island. What's the resistance in saying that Cyprus was a place where people, hunter-gatherers, would have come even earlier than previously thought?
Very good question. Another very good question. So challenging well and deep established views is not an easy thing, right? And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to actually changing and shifting the paradigm. Slowly getting there. It's in the Eastern Mediterranean, this has been particularly persistent. And I think it is because for many years, the sea, starting from that, the sea was considered as a barrier to human movement. So people could not have crossed this impassable barrier to go to an island. then why on earth will you go to an island when you have this nice expanse of continent to explore? So the second notion is that islands were resource poor. That may be true for a very small island, but for example, Cyprus is the third largest island in the Mediterranean. And we've actually shown that it had the ability to sustain human populations. The resistance, I think part of it is the lack of a large body of archaeological evidence. You can't say, whereby you say, okay, I can't deny this anymore. So for many decades, the earliest site on Cyprus was Chirokitia, right? Around what, 8,000 years before. So then at some stage, Akrotiri is discovered, and that pushes it back 4,000 or 5,000 years earlier. And it was difficult to convince people that, hey, no, how can that be? It's only one site. Well, maybe it was an accidental arrival. Slowly, but confidently, more research looking at these earlier phases has filled in this gap. So now we know that between Chirokitia and Akrotiri, there are a lot of other archaeological sites that are well established, and they show a continuous sort of human presence on the island, right? We have pushed back. Now, to take it even further, we need a sufficient body of archaeological evidence to prove beyond doubt that humans will have been there. But also, I think we need to keep having this conversation that these early humans, well, 14,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, they're Homo sapiens. They have the same cognitive skills as we do. But for example, for me, coming from a Paleolithic perspective, having trained as a Paleolithic archaeologist, I accept that, and I understand that. It's more difficult for someone who has trained in classical archaeology or later periods of prehistory to make that leap of cognition being not solely associated with Homo sapiens.
So this leads me to probably one of the biggest question of this interview here, and a lot of listeners are probably wondering, what is this conclusion based on? So, like, I mean, you mentioned at the start, you are one of many researchers, along with Corey Bradshaw, who published this work, and admittedly, as you mentioned too, there are mathematical models that are beyond my capacity of understanding. So the $64,000 question that I have for you is, what is this data based on? Like, is there a Rosetta Stone that gave you and your team an aha moment where you can say, okay, this is why we know humans settled Cyprus, or may have been visiting Cyprus, settled Cyprus, what have you, 14,000 years ago? What is this based on?
The aha moment was why don't we use a methodology that has been successfully applied in Australia? So Corey Bradshaw, he's the mathematical brains behind the paper. They successfully applied the methodology we used here in Australia, and they got great results. The aha moment for us was, well, why don't we apply the same methodology they used in that part of the world to here? Like, we are trying to fast track exciting research in the archaeology of Cyprus, right? Now, the paper itself, the only archaeological data that it uses is 10 dates from previously excavated archaeological sites that are published. So we didn't go out in the field trying to collect primary data. This takes years and years of excavation and fieldwork and material analysis. And if you're lucky to find the right the right locations, right? So our work is based on already well-established and accepted dates from sites like Chirokitia, like Klimonas, like Akrotiri. What we did was we applied an innovative stochastic mathematical model to see really when and how and if essentially hunter-gatherers could have reached Cyprus. Now we need to go to the field and try and look for these sites, which is the other part of our work here. We are trying to locate sites, but we have a better look, a better idea now of where to look for these sites.
And presumably, it's going to be a coastal site that we're looking for, that archaeologists are looking for in order to confirm the mathematical modeling.
Not necessarily. 2 points. One of our earlier sites after Akrotiri is Vretskia Roudias, and it's what for Cyprus is considered highlands, like 500 meters elevation, but it is uplands. So they are everywhere. They're not restricted to the coast. Also, we need to remember that the coastline, what is today the coastline, would not have been the coastline then, which also raises the big problem that we have. Those sites that we are looking for are most likely currently under the sea level. So we need, A, they may have been completely destroyed, or B, in order to identify them, we need different methodologies. So we need to remember that Cyprus it is an eroding environment. And the sites we're looking for are at best low visibility. So we're looking for a few small scatters of lithic stones. A lot of people, if you're not trained in them, you may walk over them and not even realize that you are on a hunter-gatherer site. But we are doing some field work. We've been doing some field work, and we may have exciting things to say in the near future.
Yeah, I think everyone's definitely excited and looking forward to how this story sort of unfolds.
Thank you. We're definitely very excited. It is challenging. I'm not gonna deny that, but it's also very exciting. And from over 30 years ago, when Akrotiri was a lone case of terminal Pleistocene archaeology, it is exciting to see that the people are engaging at least with this issue.
Dora, thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information.
Thank you so much. We are very excited, really, that people are interested in our work, and that gives us the drive to keep trying. I'm happy to be doing exciting research for Cyprus. Really, I think it's a fantastic place to do work, and it has a lot of things still to give us. The earliest prehistory of the island. Oh my God, I think there is a lot to learn.